They say the heart never forgets, but sometimes it waits until it's too late to remind you. A man who once laughed off fatherhood now wakes every morning to the sound of an empty house. No children's footsteps, no little voices calling him Dad. By the end of this story, you'll understand how one choice, made in pride and selfishness, can follow a man like a shadow for the rest of his life. And maybe you'll never look at regret the same way again. It started in the summer of '92, in a small American town where the night smelled of fresh-cut grass, and the bars stayed open a little too late. Ethan Cole was 23 then, tall, charming, with a smile that could make strangers feel like old friends. He had no steady job, no real plan for life, but he had something he thought was better: the attention of every girl in town. That's when he met Lila Carter. She wasn't like the others. She didn't fall for his smooth talk right away. She was shy, soft-spoken, and carried herself like she was guarding her heart. Ethan saw that as a challenge. One warm Friday night, he found her at the local diner. She was sitting alone at a corner booth, sipping a vanilla milkshake. He slid into the seat across from her like he'd been invited. "You don't talk much, do you?" he teased. Lila smiled politely. "I talk when there's something worth saying." That was all it took. From that night on, Ethan chased her like she was the last girl on earth. The summer passed in a blur of late-night walks, stolen kisses, and rides out to the old bridge where they'd sit with their feet dangling over the water. Lila was careful with her heart, but Ethan, he just wanted the thrill. By fall, they were inseparable. At least, that's what Lila thought. Ethan, deep down, still saw himself as a free man, someone who could walk away whenever he wanted. One night, under a sky scattered with stars, Lila told him the words she had been holding back. "Ethan, I think I'm in love with you." He kissed her. He held her close. But in his mind, he wasn't thinking about love. A few months later, Lila knocked on Ethan's apartment door. Her hands trembled as she told him she was pregnant. Ethan froze. Then he laughed. No, that's not possible. You must have it wrong. I've seen the doctor, Ethan. I'm sure." He stepped back, shaking his head. "Look, Lila, I'm not ready for this. I never wanted this. You're on your own." Lila's eyes filled with tears. She begged him to at least talk about it. But Ethan had already turned away. Years later, Ethan left that part of his life behind like it never happened. He moved to another town, started working for a local politician, and climbed his way up the ladder. By 40, he was Mayor Ethan Cole, respected, wealthy, and married to a beautiful woman named Grace. People looked at him and saw success. What they didn't see was the one thing he could never have. Grace couldn't have children. They tried for years. Doctors, treatments, prayers, nothing worked. Every Christmas, Ethan would sit by the tree with Grace, pretending the ache in his chest was just a winter cold. And sometimes late at night, he'd think of a little boy or a girl who might be grown by now, a child with a smile, a child he had walked away from. If you're still with me kindly, subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Thank you. By the time Ethan turned 50, the mayor's seat didn't feel like a throne anymore. It felt like a cage. Every speech, every ribbon cutting, every smile for the camera, it was just another way to hide from the truth. He had everything money could buy, but not the one thing money couldn't touch. One night, after another charity gala where he and Grace posed with other people's kids, Ethan came home, loosened his tie, and stared at himself in the mirror. The lines on his face weren't just from age. They were from the years of pretending he didn't care. Grace came in quietly behind him. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just tired," he lied. But the truth was, he wasn't just tired. He was haunted. It started small. He typed Lila Carter's name into his phone late at night when Grace was asleep. At first, nothing came up. Then one day, there was a blurry Facebook profile picture of a woman who looked older but still had the same guarded eyes. Ethan's heart raced as he scrolled through her page. He saw pictures of family gatherings, a few friends, and then, buried deep in her photos, a picture that made his stomach twist. A young man, maybe mid-20s, standing on a porch, smiling in the sunlight. He had Lila's eyes and Ethan's jawline. Ethan shut the phone and sat in silence. He didn't know if he wanted to cry or run or just erase the whole thing from his mind. But now that he had seen him, there was no going back. A week later, Ethan drove 2 towns over to a small hardware store where Lila was rumored to work. He sat in his car across the street, watching people go in and out. Then she appeared. Her hair was streaked with gray, her face older, but her posture still proud. She was carrying a box of supplies to a truck parked out front. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel. He wanted to get out. He wanted to say her name. But when she turned toward him, just for a second, he froze. He didn't get out. He didn't wave. He just drove away. That night, Ethan sat at his desk and started writing. Not an email, not a text, a letter. Lila, I don't know how to start this without sounding like a coward. The truth is, I was one. I was young, selfish, and blind. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if you want to hear from me, but I need you to know I regret everything. I regret walking away from you. I regret not knowing the child we created. I regret every day I spent pretending it didn't matter. He stopped. His hand trembled. He didn't know if he would ever send it. It was a Saturday morning when Ethan finally decided he couldn't hide anymore. The letter had been sitting in his desk drawer for weeks, but now it felt like it was burning a hole through him. He got in his car and drove the same 2-hour stretch of highway until he reached that small town again. He told himself he was just going to leave the letter in Lila's mailbox and walk away. But fate had other plans. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, kindly do so to help us grow, and don't forget to give me a thumbs up. The hardware store was open. Ethan parked across the street like before, letter in hand. That's when he saw him, the young man from the Facebook photo, coming out of the store with a clipboard. He was taller in person, broad-shouldered, wearing a work shirt with a name tag that read, Luke Carter. Ethan's heart thudded. That name, it confirmed everything. Luke glanced at Ethan's car for only a second, then kept walking toward a pickup truck. Ethan's chest tightened. This was it, his moment. He opened the car door and stepped out. Luke, he called. Luke stopped and turned. He didn't smile. His eyes narrowed slightly, the way you look at a stranger who somehow knows your name. Yeah? Do I know you? Ethan swallowed hard. Not exactly. I used to know your mother. Luke tilted his head, suspicious. Okay, and Ethan's mouth felt dry. Back in the day, your mom and I, we were close. I made some mistakes. Big ones. I think I might be your... Before he could finish, Luke's eyes went cold. No, don't. Ethan froze. Luke stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. Ethan froze. Luke stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. You think you can just show up now? After all these years? My mom raised me, without a dime from you. She cried herself to sleep more nights than I can count. And now you want what, to feel better? Ethan's throat tightened. No, I just wanted to meet you. To explain. To tell you I'm sorry. Luke shook his head. You don't get to show up in my life like you're some long-lost hero. You're too late. Way too late. Just then, the hardware store door opened. Lila stepped out. She saw Ethan. Her face froze in shock, but not surprise. Ethan, she said quietly. Luke turned to her, his voice trembling now. Mom! He says he's my father. Lila's eyes stayed on Ethan. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she nodded. He is. The silence that followed was the kind you could feel in your bones. Luke's hands curled into fists at his sides. His jaw tightened. Then I guess I know exactly what kind of man my father is, Luke said, before walking away without looking back. Ethan stood there, the letter still in his hand, but now it felt heavier than a stone. The drive back to his city felt longer than usual. Ethan kept replaying Luke's voice in his head. You're too late. It didn't matter that he was the mayor. It didn't matter that he had power, respect, and a perfect public image. Those words cut through all of it like glass. By Monday morning, his past had already begun to leak into the present. At the office, his secretary handed him a folded newspaper from the small-town press. Front page headline, Mayor's forgotten son? They had snapped a photo of him standing outside the hardware store with Lila. The article didn't hold back. It detailed the pregnancy denial, his walkaway, and the rumor that the young man working there was his child. By the time Ethan set the paper down, the phone on his desk was already ringing. It was Grace. "Ethan, what is this? Tell me it's not true." Ethan closed his eyes. It's true. That night, Grace didn't wait for him at home like she usually did. When he walked into the kitchen, there was a single note on the table. It read, "I can't be part of a life built on lies. Don't call me tonight." Ethan sat at the table in silence, staring at the walls. For the first time in years, his home felt truly empty, not just quiet, hollow. The next week was brutal. At community events, people didn't meet his eyes. The whispers followed him down the hallways of City Hall. At one council meeting, a local reporter called out, "Mr. Mayor, is it true you abandoned your own child for political gain?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he ended the meeting early and locked himself in his office. He poured himself a drink, but it didn't numb the sting. Because he knew the truth, he hadn't abandoned Luke for political gain. He'd abandoned him out of cowardice. One evening, he found himself parked outside the hardware store again. Luke was closing up for the night. Ethan stepped out of the car, determined this time not to leave without saying what he came to say. Luke saw him inside. "What now?" Another apology speech. Ethan shook his head. "No, this isn't for me. It's for you." He handed Luke a sealed envelope. Inside was a trust fund document. Years' worth of savings and property in Luke's name. Luke didn't take it. "You think money fixes this? That erases the fact you left my mom to do it all alone." Ethan's voice broke. "No, I know it doesn't, but I have nothing else to give you." Luke's eyes burned with anger, but also something else. The hurt of a child who had never been wanted. He didn't say a word. He just turned, locked the store, and walked away into the night. Ethan stood there in the parking lot, alone under the flickering streetlight, clutching the envelope that no one wanted. It didn't happen overnight. It was slow. One news article became three. Three became a TV segment. Soon, the whispers about the mayor's forgotten son were louder than the speeches he gave. Sponsors pulled out of his re-election campaign. 2 council members resigned in protest. And Grace still wasn't coming home. One afternoon, Ethan sat in his office staring at the framed certificate that read Mayor of Ridge County. For years, that title had been everything to him. Now it felt like a bad joke. Late one Thursday night, his phone rang. It was Lila. Her voice was shaky. "It's Luke. He's been in an accident." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Is he?" "He's alive, but it's bad. He's in the hospital." For a moment, Ethan didn't move. He had no right to rush to that hospital, but he also knew he couldn't stay away. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Ethan walked down the white hallway. Through the open door, he saw Luke lying in a hospital bed, pale, hooked to wires and tubes, his head bandaged. Lila sat beside him, holding his hand. She looked up at Ethan. "You have 5 minutes." Ethan stepped closer. For a moment, Luke's eyes fluttered open. They focused on him. "Why are you here?" Luke whispered. Ethan swallowed. "Because I couldn't let you go without knowing you were never a mistake." Luke's lip trembled, but he said nothing. He turned his head toward the wall, his breathing shallow. The beeping from the monitors suddenly changed. Nurses rushed in. Ethan stepped back, frozen, as they worked on Luke. Lila stood, tears in her eyes. After a few tense minutes, the room calmed. Luke was stable. But Ethan knew that had been his warning. Life doesn't give you forever. That night, sitting in the dark hospital waiting room, Ethan made a choice. Not a political one. Not a careful, self-serving one. But the kind of choice a father makes. He would step down as mayor. He would try, no matter how long it took, to earn Luke's forgiveness. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't care if the town judged him. He only cared about one thing, that when Luke looked at him again, it wouldn't be as a stranger, but maybe one day, as a father. 2 weeks later, Ethan Cole stood at the podium in front of a packed city hall. Reporters waited with their cameras ready. The townspeople whispered, curious about what their mayor would say. He took a deep breath. For years, I've tried to serve this town. But there's a part of my life I've ignored, and it's the part that matters most. I can't lead a community while failing my own family. So today, I'm stepping down as mayor. The room buzzed. Some were shocked. Some nodded in respect. But for Ethan, it wasn't about their approval. It was about finally doing the right thing. Do you think Ethan did the right thing? Kindly drop your comment in the comment section. Thank you. With his political career gone, Ethan's days were quieter. He spent hours at the hospital, sometimes just sitting in Luke's room, reading the sports section out loud, even when Luke was too tired to respond. There were still walls between them. Thick, cold walls built from years of absence. But every now and then, Ethan saw a crack. One day, Luke let him push his wheelchair to the rehab room, without a word of protest. Another day, he asked, almost casually, "So, what was it like being mayor?" Ethan didn't give a long speech. "Empty without you." Luke didn't answer, but he didn't turn away either. One morning, Grace showed up at the hospital with a bag of homemade soup. She hugged Ethan, told him she'd heard about what he was doing. "It's good," she said softly. "It's the man I always hoped you'd be." But Grace didn't stay. Her life had moved in a different direction, and Ethan understood. Sometimes, fixing one broken thing means losing another forever. Months later, Luke was strong enough to walk again. On a cool autumn afternoon, they sat on a bench outside the rehab center, leaves crunching underfoot. Luke stared ahead. "I'm not ready to call you Dad." "Not yet." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand." Luke glanced at him, his voice quieter. "But you can come by the house on Sundays. Mom makes good pot roast." For Ethan, those simple words felt heavier and more precious than any political victory he'd ever had. They say in small American towns, stories travel fast. The tale of the mayor who found his son after decades became a quiet kind of legend. Not because it was perfect, not because it had a fairy tale ending, but because it was real. And every time Ethan sat at that Sunday dinner table, hearing the clink of plates and the low hum of conversation, he knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, the greatest title a man can have isn't mayor, it's dad. If you have enjoyed this heartfelt story, kindly give me a thumbs up, share this story, and don't forget to subscribe. Turn up the notification bell to keep getting notification whenever I post a new story, and trust me, it keeps getting more interesting. See you in the next one.